I'm very happy to introduce two of our speakers today. I'm not going to talk about Brian because we've talked about him before. And the first speaker is Rick Rodich, and he lives about 15 minutes north of me. So I have the opportunity to see his garden usually every year, and it's a real treat. He's an all-around person. He has a forestry degree. So when you go to his garden, he has lots of unique trees. And of course, he knows every botanical name for every native plant that he grows. And then he has a huge collection of species, lilies. And that's really fun for me to see things that I've never grown before. He's an active member of several societies, Rock Garden and Gesneriads, as well as the Lily Society. And one time when I went to his house, he had a whole deck full of little pots of plants that he had started from seeds for the Rock Garden Society. He really can grow anything. And one thing that he taught me to appreciate was the foliage, to pay attention to the varied foliage on lilies. And that was really cool that he pointed that out. Wow. He started growing lilies at the age of 10 because someone took him under his wing in the Lily Society and mentored him. So you can't underestimate the importance of watching out for our young people and nurturing their interest. And he will be on the Sunday afternoon open gardens during the Lily show. So it's really well worth the extra trip to go to his garden and see what he has. And the second person I want to introduce is Forrest Piper. And I have known him since 2008. And he started growing lilies after his attendance at the 2003 NALS show in Minnesota. So again, we can't underestimate the importance of outreach and publicity for the NALS shows. And he's a prolific grower and hybridizer with many registered sturdy lilies. And as far as I know, the only trumpet that he's registered is one called Jen, an orange lily. And he is a mentor to young people who want to learn how to grow lilies from seed. And I enjoy a hybridizing class that he's taught several times in our heritage garden. He's meticulous about record keeping, so if you want to figure out how to do that, he's a good resource. His garden, Lilyland, is rented by Forrest Piper and Bill Bauer out in Shakopee. And again, that's about 15 minutes south of me. So I get to see his garden as well. But he is on the Lily Garden tour, on the bus tour on Saturday during the show. So make sure you check him out. With no more ado, I'll turn it over to Rick Rodich. Thank you.
Okay. Share the screen here. And we'll get started.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that, well, actually, the first thing I want to say is, yes, I do have a forestry degree, but it was kind of secondary to horticulture. I was doing my horticulture degree and found, oh, geez, I only need to do 2 more classes, and I suddenly have a minor in forestry. So that's how I got that. But I do like all kinds of different plants, and in fact, I started out with mainly trees and shrubs when I was younger, and then as I got older, didn't have much room for trees and shrubs, so kind of flipped over a little bit. So in the horticulture divisions that we have as a Lily Society, they don't exactly match what species, the divisions in taxonomy with species. Not anything you need to worry about, just realize that it's not exactly the same thing. So if you find some discrepancies as you're reading, just take it as it is. Um, that's about all I can say about
We
that.
know that.
Yeah. So the species lilies are really super diverse in how they grow and where they grow. Everybody's in the northern hemisphere, but other than that, they span just about everywhere. Um, and all different kinds of sizes and heights and shapes and colors and all that good stuff. So, of course, we use them to make the hybrids that we um, all love so much right now. But the basic characteristics all came from the good old species. And this is one of them here. It's an Asiatic type, Lilium amabile. The form is very uniform, very nice. There is a yellow form of this also, but it's been used in breeding for its size, even though it's smaller, but it has good inflorescence shapes to add to it along with the flower form also. Concolor is another one that is actually not used very much because it's very small, but a lot of species lilies are, and they have their goodness that they have all by themselves. Concolor is a very, very super narrow plant, and it will fit anywhere in the garden. There is a yellow form you can see up in the top left. And in fact, there was a whole bunch of several different varieties that we think of as the horticulture in the Lily Society that are not recognized in taxonomy because they really are the same genetically. Davidii is very, very commonly used in hybridizing because of its form, its ease of growth, multiplies easily, virus tolerance, all that good stuff aids in making it such a good parent for so many of our hybrids. In the left inset there, you see a picture of the sprout coming up where there's no leaves on the bottom. That's a very common thing for a species. Normally, species don't grow in barren soil like your garden. They grow in the meadows or the woods or the prairies among all kinds of other foliage plants. And they have just evolved that there's no reason to grow leaves down at the bottom, even in the spring, because all the other foliage is going to come up and just cover it up, and they won't be able to get the sun that they need to make food for the plant. So why bother making them? So this is a very common trait for them to have a bare stem. It's nothing that you did wrong. It's nothing that you can help. If that's the way they come up, that's the way that they come up. Lilium lancifolium is grandma's lily, you could say. It's the one that's probably the most common, at least here in the States, and the one that has the little black bulbils in the axils of the leaves that you see in the picture down the bottom right corner there. Those are not seeds, those are actually bulbils. They're like little baby bulbs, and you can take them off and grow new plants, and those new plants will be exact copies of the mother, as opposed to seeds, which will have some variation. There's lots of different forms of this also. The main form that you see everywhere is actually a triploid, but there are diploid forms that they use for hybridizing. There's also yellow, you can see on the bottom left, which is really quite choice. And in the upper right, you'll see the double form and how not so pretty, some people will say, but sometimes you can get some good pictures for that too. Lilium pumilum has very small flowers, but lots of them. Very strong color, shiny foliage. It can be almost yellow all the way to red, and anywhere in between. The insect on the bottom is the wild form. If you find it in commerce, you probably will get a form that has where the flowers are a little more congested on the stem. And I'm not sure if that is normal for the species in a different part of the world, or if there's a little bit of hybridization that's creeping in too. Lilium pennsylvanicum. This is the one that most people still think of as Lilium doricum. Pennsylvanicum is just something they reverted back to the original name, the first name that it was given, and that's why this is the name that should be used now. Tons of variation on this one because it grows all over the eastern or the northern part of Eurasia. The center one actually is I grew from seed from one of Darm's collections, Darm selections. On the bottom left, or on the bottom right, I should say here, that one is actually from seed, wild seed from Sakhalin Island. Got the one directly above it here. That's from the Great Khinga Mountains in northeastern Siberia. And then you've got here on the upper left here, that's an alpine form that's only 7 inches high, top of the flower to the ground. So there's lots of different forms of it. You see the tomentos, or the flacos tomentos, I guess, tomentosum, I guess you could say. Tomentum, that's what I'm trying to say. Up here, that naturally covers it. It comes from cold areas there, and that helps keep it warm when the sun comes out. This species can have lots of that or very little. Lilium maculatum, even though it's quite different in taxonomy, to tell the difference, you can tell the difference from whether it has that pubescence or not. Maculatum is another one that is very heavily used in hybridization because you see on the bottom left inset there how nice and tight rosette the leaves make, and they're nice and shiny and glabrous and disease-free usually. Lots of good things going on for this plant. Magellanense is a fairly uncommon one, especially this form of it. But it has really huge flowers. The flowers are, once it's, even after it's curled up, that bottom part there, the diameter is 6 to 7 inches in diameter. Really beautiful flower. Doesn't seem to hybridize much with anything though, at least that I've found. Wild forms are a lot of times are quite small, and this is normal for this species, the Lilium colosum, another Siberian native. When it's all curled up like you see there, it's only about 1 inch in diameter, and the matte color, the matte orange pumpkin color is the normal color for it, although it does have yellow forms and red forms also. Another really narrow one, and you can see right up there on the upper left there, how the foliage stays quite narrow. Lilium tenii, another name change from what it used to be called Lijiangjianse. Another one that is not too difficult to grow, but it takes a while for it to get going. The flowers again are still fairly small, about 1.5 inches to 2 inches in diameter once it's all curled up already. They have this interesting characteristic of long pedicels that hang down. Even though the pedicels themselves are quite rigid, they just have no inclination to go up. But this one and this one are the only 2 lily species that will naturally cross with each other that I've found. Taliense is normally white with spots. This one has a little bit of yellow in it. It's a variety that we've dubbed variety Kaichin. in the lily world, at least the American lily world, because it came from a nursery woman in China called Chen Yi. And she was the one that distributed this one that was a little bit different form. Buchartrii looks very, very similar, but actually quite different in the taxonomic world, and it will definitely not cross with the previous one, even though it looks a lot like it. But it will cross with Lancome, another two species that are closely related. And there are some good hybrids. The North hybrids came from Lancome crosses with other things. Lilium fargesii, one that's going to be hard to find, but a good one like this one. You'll be able to get the flower to grow about 4 inches in diameter after the tepals have fully curved. Notice on the bud there the interesting little knobs at the end, another characteristic of this species. Papilliferum, another hard to find, unusual one, and hard to grow, actually, hard to grow nicely, rightly. I grew this one for, probably about 12 years before I got it to grow the way it should. But this is it in its glory. Lilium mardigan, what happened there? Has lots and lots of different variations. Again, because it grows naturally in such a wide swath throughout Russia and Eurasia. So these are some of the forms that are available in the wild even. And think of all the things that we've done with it. The yellow in mardigan, at least in cultivation, will always come from this species, the one on the right there. That is a Lilium handsonii, and that's used a lot with hybridizing with mardigan and some of the other mardigan section species to get all the great mardigan flowers that we have nowadays. If you look on the upper left there, that is Lilium disticum, and the lower left is Lilium cinctalense. Many of you know about the Lilium formosanum, which you might hear about a little later on too. The normal form is going to be growing 6 feet plus a lot of times, and this is the dwarf form that we used to know as variety Pricei. Since then, have discovered that there really isn't that much difference between them, genomically speaking. So they're in the taxonomy, botanically speaking, there is no variety difference between them. Henryi is one of the very best ones that people have hybridized with, and that's because of the nice flowers, the opportunity to get so many flowers in inflorescence, a single stalk, I mean. Its ability to thrive in all different pHs of soil. Its virus tolerance is just so good and easy to grow all around. Its longevity, just a great lily to use. And this is what it normally looks like in the wild. If your Lilium henryi is always wanting to tip over at the top, that's what it normally does, and it's not something that you're doing wrong. It normally grows at the edges of woods where it comes up through shrubs. Again, this is one that does not have any leaves at the lower parts of the stem because of that. And then it leans out into the sun. Has a yellow form too. Lilium rastornii, the next closest species to henryi, is used for in crosses too. One of the reasons is because it has good straight stocky stems. Another trumpet form that has all the good smells from them, Eucanthum, nice one to use. Lots of good foliage in that one. Also regali, another one that you're all very familiar with. Sulfurium. Depending on where you get them, you might be able to find one that's a lot hardier than what the books will say. I actually had one that grew in my garden in Minnesota for about 10 years. Yeah, finally it went though. In the American species, we have the very best one, in my opinion. This is Lilium canadense. Lots of different forms of this, yellow to orange to red. No spots, some spots, little spots, big spots. This is one that I grew from wild seed from Kentucky. And Lilium michiganense. This one and Lilium superbum are quite similar, michiganense being the smaller form and naturally going more towards in the Midwest, whereas superbum is more towards the east and south. Very little difference between them. I'm not even sure that I would be able to tell the difference between them myself. Philadelphicum is the other one that is native to the Midwest areas and the prairies of Canada. This is one that likes to be in the proverbial constantly moist soil, but never in wet feet. So it likes to have that water table, a foot or two down, and so that it has always that option to be there. This is one that is wild right in the Minneapolis area here. And we have them kind of dotted throughout the southern half of the state. The Western North American lilies, so this is Lilium pardolinum. This is not one that I grew, but it shows you what can actually happen in somebody's garden. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Then the Oriental lilies, we have lots of those in good hybridization, but even the wild ones are really, really nice. This is just a straight species, and the beauty of them is just awesome. Lilium speciosum, again an Oriental type. This one is especially good for its virus tolerance and its ease of growth. And this is a closer relative, Speciosum gloriosoides. Eventually, I think they're going to figure out that this is going to be a species all by itself because no one crosses it with the regular Speciosum with success. There is this form, which is the Chinese form, and also the Taiwanese form, which is like halfway between this one and the plain Speciosum. And so I've been trying to tell you that there's always all these different kinds of characteristics in the species themselves. And we've been focusing on the flowers and the foliage mostly, but it's the whole plant itself, even the seeds. These are all seeds in the Lilium genus. They're all different. This picture is taken with a method called candling, where the light source is actually backlit, so you can see the embryos in the seeds themselves. The middle one, of course, is the other one that is not. Even the seed pods are going to be different. Lots of different kinds on there. All my little tags on there of my hybridizing efforts. And the bulbs. Beautiful, beautiful bulbs. Just think of how much better they would have been if I would have brushed even more of the dirt off of them. But such colorfulness and variability in them. And I believe this is it. Yeah, this is the last picture. So thank you for listening. And
oh, hang on,
yeah.
Rick. Could you identify the different bulbs for people on your picture there?
You bet. So the upper left is Lilium michiganense. Then we have small bulblets, the small bulblets of Davidii. Then a Mardigan bulb. That one is Claude Shride, which is a little different looking than most Mardigans. Most Mardigans have a little more narrow scales on them. Then on the middle left is Longiflorum cross Henryi cross. And the middle is just a series of Asiatic bulblets, stem bulblets that I took up from fall when I was digging things up. So that's a mismatch of everything, including hybrids. Middle right is, let's see, what is this one?
It's got trumpet in it.
Yeah. I see. Oh, that one is the Longiflorum henryi. Yeah, that one's the Longiflorum henryi. Then we have the middle one on the left is actually a hybrid. That one is a Zeus. It's called Zeus. Bottom left is Lilium oxypetalum. Bottom middle is Lilium visticum. And bottom right is the natural cross that some people call Lilium McWillianum. It's the natural cross of some native Korean lilies, and that's going to be Lilium tsingtaoense crossed with either or Lilium medioides. They haven't decided which. You want to go back to the other seeds one? Do we have time?
What's this?
Did you want to go back
Yeah,
to
let's
the
go back
seed
to the
one?
seeds. It'll help people. Thank you.
Yeah, so the first one on the upper left is Lilium papilliferum. Notice on that one that it does not have any wings on it. It's very, very unusual for lily seeds. Then we have tree, and on the upper right is Pomponium. Polyphyllum is the round one. In the middle there is Mardigans. We've got on the left is straight, just plain old Mardigans, and on the right is Mardigan album. It's an interesting thing about the albums. They have white seeds. Then to the right of that is Lilium canadense. Bottom left is Washingtonianum. And then a Mardigan that is backlit, and Lilium kesselringianum on the bottom right.
The Mardigans don't have the genetic material as a string. They have it like a round thing. So the bottom middle, I don't believe it is a Mardigan seed.
What are you talking about, a string? Oh, you mean the
See
dark
that line?
thing?
There's a line in between in the seed that looks like that is the genetic material. The Mardigan seeds don't have that. The Henry, the Rostorni, they have that. Just recently I had another one, I forget now what it is, but the
Okay.
Mardigans.
Well, listen, Luminita, will you just let Rick finish, and then you can.
Okay.
I think I am finished with that now.
Well,
So
can I break in and
my
say
life-
they have to have a line in the middle? That's not the genetic material, it's the embryo.
That's right.
So it's the new
Okay,
plant.
let's Rick finish, please, and
Yeah.
then you can go to questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, as far as I can't say. I don't know if Mardigans don't have genetic material, where are they getting genetics? I guess
No, it's okay. Anyways, so
but I will look and see at my other, because I have tons of seed pictures, and I will be able to.
okay. Thank you. Excellent photography. Beautifully photographed. Thank you. Now we have the questions. Oh, we have questions. Mr. Ford asked, what did you say was good to cross with Taliensi?
Oh, okay. So that's going to be Lilium tennion, the yellow one that I was showing just before that.
Oh, okay.
There must be more
And
questions.
I did go through kind of fast.
Peggy, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that Rick has shared his list of species and the ways they germinate, and that's on the North Star Lily website. So you might want to check that out. It's really a nice, helpful list.
Oh, that's very nice of you, Rick. Thank you. Beautiful pictures. Well organized. Thank you very much. And there's got to be another couple questions.
Could I ask if Majoense is hard to grow? Majoense?
Well, I had first gotten it when I didn't know that much about lilies, and I really didn't have a good garden to grow it in. It was surprisingly tolerant. Because when I bought my first house and I bought it in the fall and looked at the garden, and they had beautiful tomatoes and peppers growing in the garden. I thought, oh, well, this is going to be good. Well, when spring came along, it was your proverbial 4 inches of topsoil with heavy clay underneath. And that's what I had to work with in those first few years. And because the garden was ringed with lilacs, old lilacs, and a big, huge maple tree. Even though it was heavy clay, it didn't stay wet very long. It just, all that moisture got sucked out. So all my lilies would go dormant like 2 months earlier than they should, but then they came up next spring just fine. And so, but they grew that much slower because of that. When I finally did get it, move it to a better place, I moved it to a box where I had manufactured soil of compost and sand. It really loved that.
What temperature, climate wise? Is it?
Well, this is zone 4.
Okay.
Mhm. And back then it was 4A. Now it's 4B.
Okay.
Yeah. And as far as Majoense goes, if you go to buy that online or in a catalog, you may or may not get that particular one that I was showing. There's a lot of them out there that have just spots, as far as instead of the conglomeration of spots that you'll see like in the tangos, for instance.
Okay.
It looks almost like Nepalese, that one that you had with the center so dark like that.
But it is really quite different. In fact, the leaves are very different. The leaves are very stiff and waxy and much more broad.
Thanks very much. I definitely want to grow that. So that's heartening to hear that it survives. That's good.
Yeah.
Majoense is a zone 6 lily, so you will have to do either heavy mulching or protection.
Colin won't have to. He's out in Victoria,
Yeah, I'm
on
okay.
Victoria Island.
Zone
He's
7,
in
8,
say, yeah. So that's not a problem with him. Okay, thank you again. Now we'll have Forrest present Trumpets.
Hello. Now that I'm unmuted.
That would be helpful. Yes.
Every time. Well, hi. And when I got the invitation to present this subject, I quickly said yes, and I was eager to do so because I like trumpet so much. And I have to say that when I was gathering the information to put together, I started to think, what did I get myself into? Because there are a lot of puzzles and controversies and unknowns in Division 6. And it's a little bit hard to say definitive things sometimes, but I think I got it put together. So let's get started. Next slide, please. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about strains. Lori spoke about strains in the Martagon talk. But since there are so many trumpets and some Aurelians that are strains, it's important to understand what that really means. Then we're going to talk about trumpets and Aurelians a little bit. What's an Aurelian anyway? And some tips on growing them. And then most of the time is going to be spent looking at individual varieties. For the most part, I chose varieties that are commonly available in the marketplace today, or you might have in your gardens already. Next slide. So here are the definitions for strains and groups and grexes and so on. Remember this, a strain is not a clone. A clone is, if a lily is a clone of another lily, its genetic material is the exact copy of that other lily. And in the same growing conditions, they should be indistinguishable from another. They should look exactly alike. A strain isn't quite that. It's a group, well, I shouldn't use the word group. It's a set of lilies, in this case, that closely resemble each other. And not only that, they're genetically related, and seedlings produced from the parents in this strain also resemble the strain and are part of the strain. So it's almost a case where a strain is true from seed. In other words, it's a closed group. You breed two strain parents together and you get more of that same strain. More trumpets are strains that are clones, actually. You'd be surprised how many. So a grex, by the way, I know in other, for other flowers, grex might mean something different, but in lily world, grex and strain are the same thing. And finally, group, in the 2007 edition of the International Lily Register, ILR, all the strains have been renamed groups. So if you look in the register and you see a variety and it says group, you can usually, but not always, assume that that means it's a strain. So all strains are groups, but not all groups are strains. Okay, why do we care about strains? One reason is, let's say that you have pink perfection growing in your garden, and your neighbor does too, but they don't look alike, and you might wonder why that is. Well, their pink perfection is a strain, which means that there will be variability in the color and maybe a little bit of the form from one example to the next. And the catch is, what does similar mean? How similar does it have to be before you think that maybe I really don't have pink perfection? That's a really hard question to answer. And I can't answer it because there are probably lilies sold today under the name Pink Perfection that really aren't that anymore. But we don't know which ones they are. So it's a really tough question. The other reason you need to know that lilies are a strain is if you're a judge, and I know there are judges out there, you need to understand that two lilies that are members of a strain aren't going to look exactly alike, and you have to allow for that when you judge them. Next slide, please. Also, you need to know which lilies are strains if you're going to enter your lilies in shows. This section D and section E here are from last year's NALS show schedule. And it's the same for this year's NALS show schedule. And you'll notice that all your clones, which are most lilies that you have probably, go in section D. However, strains go in section E. So if you entered your lily in section D and wonder why it wound up in section E, it's because someone decided or knew that it was a strain and they put it where it belonged. Next slide, please. So what's an Aurelian? Division 6 is trumpets and Aurelians. And everybody kind of knows what a trumpet is. And the quick and dirty definitions for these things are Well, a trumpet is a trumpet, and an Aurelian is a trumpet with Henry I in the parentage. Okay, that works some of the time. An example of a trumpet might be Pink Perfection here again, and its parentage is, according to the Lily Register, Leucanthum and Sargentia. And those are both trumpets. The 4 trumpet species behind Division 6 are on the top here, the first 4. And Henry I is also a species behind Division 6 on the right. An example of an Aurelian under this definition would be White Henry I, which is a cross between Henry I and Leucanthum. So that's a nice tidy definition. And we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about why that doesn't work. Next slide, please. Okay, here are a couple trumpets that you know, probably, African Queen and Golden Splendor. Tried and true trumpets, and we've all probably seen them around. If you look in the Lily Register, you will see that it gives Leucanthum, Sargentii, and Henry I as parentage without any details about how they're used, percentages or anything like that. So we have to go back and understand that these particular trumpets and old ones like this were developed in the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 60s. That's 60 and 70 years ago. At that time, there were a lot of hybridizers working with these, and they were working with material that was even older, even going back to the 30s. And by the time that it was time to enter or put entries in what became the Lily Register, all of those trumpet strains, which they all were, people had generally lost track of what was what. Now, it's easy to see how Henry I could be part of African Queen because it's orange, and where else would orange come from? It's also easy to see that it could be part of Golden Splendor because Henry I has both yellow and orange pigments, and so there you are. The only fly in the ointment here is that there was a yellow trumpet developed strictly from the trumpet species. I think it was just regalia, and it was made by allowing the yellow center to completely fill the inside and outside of the flower. And it did not have Henry I in it. However, if you read about this, you'll see that there were some accounts of that strain incorporating Henry I also. So probably we think, maybe many people think, blah, 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 that Henry I is involved in the parentage of these 2 trumpets, and probably all the orange trumpets that you know about, and probably all the yellow trumpets that you know about. So our definition is breaking down a bit. Next slide, please. But that's okay. It's okay because we don't really care. Next slide, please. What have we learned? Well, we learned that a lot of what we think of as trumpets probably have Henry I in their background. And so we'll use this, the second bullet here, as our definition of trumpet and Aurelian. A trumpet is a lily that's trumpet shaped in Division 6. An Aurelian is a lily in Division 6 that is not trumpet shaped. It's either bowl, flat, recurved, or something which shows the obvious form influence of Henry I. These are the terms that everybody uses, and so that's what we'll use today. Also, trumpets and Aurelians, many are strains, and we've talked about why you need to know why, but just keep in mind that probably most of the trumpets that you see or have are strains. Next slide, please. Okay, here's some notes, tips on trumpets. By the way, this is Pink Perfection growing in my yard. It's actually 2 plants. It's not a trick. The taller stem is just starting to bloom, and the lower stem hasn't started to bloom yet. So that's why it looks a little funny. But that's Pink Perfection. Trumpets are tall, and their inflorescence is, compared to other lilies, a lot heavier compared to the thickness of their stem. Plus, when it rains and they're in bloom, they get amazingly heavy. So if you don't provide a stake at least halfway up the inflorescence, you might find that after a rain or a wind or something like that, you have the inflorescence pointing down or on the ground. It's happened. Staking is very important for trumpets. Next thing is, in the northern zones, here in zone 4, for example, trumpets have a tendency to come up too soon in the spring. If you don't plant them deeply enough and mulch heavily, you'll lose some or have some loss for the year from a late freeze. So keep that in mind. And finally, trumpets, pure trumpets, and many of the trumpets that we have are not long-lived. And as a result, if you can replace them, fine. But if you have one that you can't replace, I'll recommend that you plan on scaling that trumpet about every 3 or 5 years, or you will lose it in all likelihood. Next slide, please. Okay, now trumpets. Here are the 3 common trumpets that you find in almost every general nursery or plant catalog. Even G.H. Wild has trumpets. Usually, if the catalog has 1 or 2 pages devoted to lilies out of the 70 or something, then those pages have a little square somewhere, and it says Chinese trumpets. And you'll have African Queen, Golden Splendor, and Pink Perfection. And you'll have Regalia, the species, as the white one. So the incredible, what used to be a very large number of trumpets for sale have over time just sort of limited itself to these 3 or 4. That's starting to change a little bit, but for a long time we could only get a few in general commerce. I see a question, long-lived. Long-lived means 3 or 5 years, the trumpet's just going to disappear. Whereas most lilies, you can plan on them living a longer time than that. Next slide, please. Here's Pink Perfection. Now in the lily register, and for a lot of the examples that I give here, I'm going to quote the parentage listed in the lily register, which is sometimes useful and sometimes not. For these older ones, I think it's just a guess at what the hybridizers or whoever made the entry guessed at the time. You can see this was hybridized about 1950. And it probably does have these 2 species in it, and probably just these 2. But you can see in this example here, the 3 pictures that aren't from the lily nook are from my yard. And they look like 3 different lilies, but of course they're just part of a strain. And so we just have to accept that they're going to be that variable. Next slide, please. Golden Splendor. This one goes back farther, even farther than Pink Perfection. It goes all the way back to the 30s. You can see my example here on the right doesn't look exactly like that one from the catalog. And again, that's probably because it's a member of a strain. And there will be some variability. What varies a lot is the coloring on the reverse. Now, more desirable is to have this be a darker color, and somehow those always find their way into the catalogs. But when you get to bulbs, that doesn't always turn out to be true, and it's true for other varieties too. At least I found it to be so. That the reverse isn't as dark as the one in the picture in the catalog, but they're still part of those strains. Next slide, please. Here's African Queen, we've talked a little bit about also. And again, the catalog picture shows a darker reverse than the one in my yard. I really like this. This lived for about 5 years and then disappeared. I have to say that trumpets set seed like crazy. And you can get up to 800 seeds in one diploid trumpet pod. And one thing that will certainly shorten the lives of your trumpets is to let it go to seed. I just noticed that if you can deadhead it as quickly as possible, that will prolong the life of your trumpet. Next slide, please. Here's some other trumpets that you might have heard about or might even have. Midnight is fairly old too, not as old as Pink Perfection. And there is, according to the register, there is Henryi in there because the Aurelian group includes Henryi, but we don't really know. Midnight is hard to find these days. The Lily Garden has it from time to time. It quickly sells out. I've had it in my garden, and these are the picture on the left is from my garden here. But some of the midnights that I've seen aren't quite that dark. On the right, we have Golden Scepter. And even though it's not listed this way in the Lily Register, it is a strain. And you'll see that it varies also. For instance, the one I got here on the left has yellow pollen, but that's not the way the one in the catalog is. So welcome to the world of strains. A question might be, how do you tell Golden Scepter from Golden Splendor? Because they both are yellow, they both have dark reverses, they're both strains. How do you tell the difference? And I don't have any idea how to tell because I can't tell. They're less variable from each other than they are within the strain. So their appearances probably overlap, and I don't know how to tell them apart. I just believe what I get when I buy one, I believe that that's what I got. Next slide, please. Here's another trumpet that the Lily Garden makes available. It's newer, it's also a strain. It's another pink one. This is doesn't get quite as tall as Pink Perfection, and the inflorescence is a little bit more crowded. But it's nice. It's not as untidy as Pink Perfection either, if you like lilies that are a little bit closer to eye level. Next slide, please. We have up-facing trumpets. There was an older series of these called Herald Angels, and it had white, yellow, and pink, but not orange. And those were strains. Those were clearly strains. This one I can't figure out. In the Lily Register, it doesn't say it's a group, so there's no hint there. But if you look at the descriptions in the register, they are incredibly detailed. And by piece part in the lily and color and so on. And usually you can't do that for a strain because it's going to vary. But most trumpets these days are strains, and I would be surprised if these weren't. So I don't really know. However, they're nice lilies. They get about 5 feet tall. People joke around and say that they're rain gauge lilies because when it rains, you get to know how much it rained by looking at your lilies. Next slide, please. There are some tetraploid trumpets, and this one, Tropical Isle, unfortunately, as far as I know, is not available anymore. However, B&D sold it about 15 years ago, and it still might be out there. I've still got one bulb, which I should probably scale. But it's a tetraploid trumpet. It was used a lot in hybridizing. So when you looked at the seed exchange after this came out, you saw a lot of hybrids with Tropical Isle in it. It was a very good lily and very popular at the time. I liked it a lot. Next slide, please. And then there are the moons. There's the moon series. Robert Griesbach developed, as you know, he worked only in tetraploids and he worked with trumpets. Eventually, he came out with a series, I believe, sold to the Dutch, who sold them under these names: Rising Moon, Beijing Moon, and Eastern Moon. They're tetraploids. They're good lilies. Rising Moon is become more popular than the other two here, at least as far as the catalogs go. It's starting to replace Golden Splendor, I see, in some catalogs that only offer one yellow trumpet. And that's probably good. The pink in the two on the right does fade a little in heat, so yours could look a little bit differently from these. But I believe these are clones, but I'm not sure. Next slide, please. So what is this with Eastern moon and Easter morn? There is a controversy here. After Eastern moon was out for a while, people started to notice that, wait a minute, this looks exactly like Easter morn. Are these the same lily? Could they possibly be the same lily? Well, Easter morn is a Division 8 lily that came out before Eastern moon. And a lot of people had it in their gardens, well established, and everybody knew what it looked like. So how could this possibly happen? I don't think that if true, in other words, if they're the same lily now that in commerce, what probably happened, in my opinion, is that Easter morn started to be sold as Eastern moon. So when you bought Eastern moon, what you really got was Easter morn. That's one explanation. I don't have these growing right next to each other, and I don't have Eastern moon anymore, but I'm going to do this again. I'm going to grow them right next to each other and see if I can tell the difference. And if you have them, try that too. I'm sure when we get to the lily show this summer, if there are either of these or both of these in the show, there'll be quite a lot to talk about. Next slide, please. And there's a fourth moon, Passion Moon. It's also one of the greaseback moons. Some suppliers sell this as a trumpet, along with the other moons. Some suppliers sell it as an OT. But what is it? Well, next slide, please. It's an OT. It's an OT because of the red center. That has to come from Speciosum rubrum, and so that makes it an OT. Next slide, please. More tetraploids, and these are ones brought to you by the Lily Garden. These are all strains, and I say group here, but I use that interchangeably here with strain. They're all strains, and they're all brought to you again by Lily Garden and developed at Lily Garden. Thank you, Judith. These have become a little bit more popular lately, just as they've gotten out there and people have seen them. I've grown every one of these except Ice Follies, and I really like them. Highly recommend them, and they're good to hybridize with. Next slide, please. Finally, on the trumpets, Lily Garden also has lily called flugelhorn. And it's not a clone, it's not a group, it's not a strain, it's not anything like that. It's just a group of, it's just a set of tetraploid lilies, trumpets that are sold under the name flugelhorn, for lack of a better name. So these are ones that I've grown. You can see how variable they are. They're nice lilies. And some of them might deserve their individual name, but they don't have one. So they're just lilies. But that's flugelhorn. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, Aurelians. This one on the right is Sandra. And you can see it probably has a lot of Henryi in it. Now keep in mind when we talk about Aurelians that we know it has trumpet parentage, we know it has Henryi parentage. We don't know how much of either one, but it has some Henryi parentage. It could be a lot, it could be a little. Depending on how much Henryi parentage it has, Henryi will obviously have more or less influence over things like color, form, height, all the traits of lily. To the extent that Henryi did have some influence in this particular lily that you're thinking about, you'll find that the first 4 number or traits here in my list, these are all good things, and these all come from Henryi. It's more cold hardy. I noticed that Peggy said I didn't grow lilies before I went to the lily show. That's not true. I had 4 lilies. I had 3 trumpets, which are long gone, and I had Henryi. And I still have Henryi, the same clump that I had in 1995. So again, more cold hardy, longer lived, more disease resistant, all good things for lilies. The other thing it brings is a larger inflorescence and bud count. Henry, I can have up to 50 buds. I don't think I've seen an Aurelian with 50 buds, but some with quite a few. And that's good. The later bloom trait, Henry I blooms later than Trumpets, so an Aurelian is going to tend to bloom later also. That to me is a blessing and a curse because it extends the lily season about 2 weeks. And sometimes at the end of my lily season, I'll either have Black Beauty be the last lily or some Aurelian will be sticking around. But they are the last ones to bloom. So that's good. But the bad part is that they bloom so late, they're hardly in shows. There aren't many shows here that have many Aurelians, if any, in them. Last year was an exception. We had a lot of Aurelians. We had a later show. We had an early season. An Aurelian won best in show and second best in show, which is another award that we give here. And there were about, I don't know, 30 Aurelians in a show where we had about 170 stems. So that's quite a few. So I like them because they have later bloom. And I just hope that I can bring some to the show because they're so good. They do have smaller flowers in general because Henry I has smaller flowers than Trumpets. So they tend to have smaller flowers. And the colors are limited to white, yellow, and orange. Also, Henry I will, I'll say, dilute or mute or suppress the fragrance that Trumpets naturally have. So many Aurelians have no fragrance at all. Some are tall and need staking, again, partially because of Henry I being long, and you saw the one that Rick showed. That's a pretty good form, and to the extent that Aurelians take after that, they need staking for that reason. Next slide, please. So this is sort of the patriarch, if you will, of the Aurelian of the Aurelians. It's a simple cross between Henry I and Leucanthum, one of the variants that's centifolium. And it is this plant that I have taken pictures of here. This plant has been growing where it is now for at least 10 years. It multiplies and I divide it and put it back, and it just keeps going. It's good for hybridizing. Gets to about 5 feet normally. And it blooms, I would say, sort of in the middle of the Aurelian season. So it might or might not be in a lily show that centers around Asiatics. Highly recommended. Next slide, please. Okay, Lady Alice. Well, okay. Lady Alice, see these 3 pictures? They're from 2 different catalogs and then the one I got. This is obviously not the same lily. And I don't think that you could even say that this was a strain. So I think, my own theory, I think that Lady Alice is a name that different suppliers of bulbs give to lilies that look vaguely like this. White with an orange center, very reflexed, some papillae, some pencil marks, but, could vary widely. So I'm sure that, in the beginning, it was really Lady Alice that was being sold, but now Lady Alice takes on many forms. After I put this together, I saw G.H. Wild's book, or catalog, and they have a 4th one that doesn't look anything like these. So Lady Alice is sort of a puzzle and sort of a challenge to figure out whether you really got Lady Alice or not. Too bad, but it's a good lily. It's a long-lived lily. Gets to about 6 feet in my yard, sometimes less. I recommend this one also if you don't have it. Next slide, please. Madam Butterfly came out about 20 years ago, or I'm sorry, 15 years ago. It's also a long-lived lily. It tends to be a little bit shorter in my garden, and the blooms are a little bit smaller than most Aurelians, but they tend to form these almost perfect spheres because they're so recurved, but just the right amount so it tends to form a sphere. And it's very distinctive when you see it in the garden. You can look at it and say, a little smaller in a sphere, that's Madam Butterfly. I like it a lot. I think of it as a cute Aurelian. I think Lily Garden makes it available today. I recommend this one also. Next slide. And we said that Aurelians can be white or yellow or orange, and they can be all white, all yellow, all orange, or white with a yellow center or white with an orange center. This one is all yellow, and it's a good one. It's really tall, 6 feet, I would say. And these are pictures from my yard also. It lives a long time also, and it's also very popular for hybridizing. Developed by, once again, Columbia Platt. Thank you, Judith, again. And it's also available at the Lily Garden. I know it sells out a lot of the time, but if you can find it, if you can get it there, I would get it in your garden. Next slide, please. I included Louise. This is an old Minnesota Aurelian. It's not very popular outside of Minnesota, but the show is here this year, so there might be some in the show if the season is right. It takes the form of Henry I being tall and floppy, as you see on the right there. It's almost white, but it has yellow or tan in the center and a lot of papillae and pencil marks. And it's pretty reliable, long-lived. Next slide, please. Okay, this one, you can make up your own exclamation here. Mine is wow. Frida Willis. You can't buy it anywhere today that I know of. It was available at SW Gardens for a few years, and it was developed by Peter Sheeman as the S of SW Gardens. Since then, it's made its way around the lily community by word of mouth and begging. You can't believe how much bigger this is than almost any other Aurelian that you could grow. You can see Jim Alt here. Now he's a normal sized human being. He's not a dwarf. You can see how much taller it is than Jim. And also on the left, that's part of Lilyland. Those tall stems in a group, that's Frida Willis. And all the other stems in there that you see are other Aurelians and OTs and trumpets that are normally the tall lilies in the garden, but not in this bin. So the flowers are pretty large too. I would say 7 inches or so. Longer if you stretch out the tepals. It's a great lily, multiplies fast. I've been giving it away from time to time. I finally came to the realization that I should be scaling it and giving it away. So I did that this year. Anyway, this is a wonderful lily. It's hard to believe how large it is, but it is. It's just great. Nothing wrong with it at all. And everybody that sees it says, I want one of those. So get one if you can find one. Next slide, please. Starry Night. This is a relatively new one, developed by Sherwin. I forget his first name. He has developed or is developing a lot of new Aurelians made available by the Lily Garden, and he's got a couple or 3 new ones this year. This one was out a few years ago, and I grow it, and it's a good lily in my garden. It gets about 4 feet tall. Next slide, please. There aren't many tetraploid Aurelians. I know Robert Griesbach was working on getting a tetraploid Henryi to work with, but I don't think he ever succeeded in that. If he had, I'm sure there would be a lot more tetraploid Aurelians around. However, here's one, white amber, that he was able to develop. And white amber is sold by Lily Nook off and on. I think it's this year. I think it's in this year. The flower resembles white Henryi, but it's a lot larger. White amber is probably 4 feet tall. It doesn't get that tall, but the flowers are really nice and also good to hybridize with. Next slide, please. Questions? Ryan, do you want to MC the questions?
Okay, questions, the chat. Is Frida Willis diploid?
As far as I know.
And Chuck said it's Len Sherwin of Wyoming.
Right, okay.
Frida Willis will cross with tetraploid trumpets in my garden and make copious viable seed. But Sandra will too. So, and Sandra looks more diploid than Frida Willis does. Just the flowers are smaller. It's just the flowers are so huge on Frida Willis.
Right.
I don't know. Has anybody looked at Patrick? Do you know Patrick Brown? Has anybody checked Frida Willis for ploidy?
Not that I know of.
No. Okay.
I've noticed that White Henry I will cross with tetraploid trumpets also.
Okay.
And I've got hybrids that are White Henry and Rising Moon that are kind of interesting.
Yeah, certainly you could get triploids, right? Like through that, or even tetraploids with gamete reduction or whatever, however they do it.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much, Forrest, for an excellent presentation, helping us clarify strains versus groups. And yes, Judith, I've got on you mute yourself. Remember that lower left button.
It doesn't always seem to work. Anyway, what I wanted to say a couple of things, and one is it's really interesting to look at the pollen of things. Like if you look at the pollen of White Henry under the microscope, or a lot of those that were really early under specific hybrids, you see there's a range of types of pollen grains, and so you do get some unreduced gametes, and that's how come some of these you can make some crosses out the other way because they're. And I've found that in a lot of things that were interspecific. But the point I want to make that the reason it's so confusing about the strains is they use that term. They were bred true for color and color only. So of course they don't all look the same. It's the color. So the pink perfections, and they tried to breed them as dark as they could so they would be pink wherever you grew them, because that's always the color. And the same thing, that's because the reverses in a cool climate will show up because the pink pigment that's sitting on top of the green or the white or whatever will show up. But so the reason you see those old strains around forever and ever and ever, you made the point about how many seeds you can get out of a pod. Well, if you got a half an acre, if you're a Dutch grower and you have a half an acre of pink trumpet lilies that breed true for pink, are you going to go to the are you going to tissue culture a bulb, or are you going to scale bulbs, or are you going to just save 3 seed pods and grow the seed, which you can do in the same period of time? So that's why those are still in the trade. But today they're looking for, often different things. And so the newer ones, they propagate in tissue culture. So they don't care if it's a slow propagator, that doesn't matter to them. And so that's why a lot of times we'll see the newer things, and it isn't surprising. And so when you think about it, like the strains are like, originally they were F1 strains. And so they would select, a lot of times they would introduce one parent. The original African queen was a clone that had a very dark color. And if you use that as the pollen parent with similar things, they would all have the same color, and then they would sell that as a strain because they didn't have tissue culture then. And you're not going to produce 2,000 of something by scaling. Trumpets don't scale very rapidly. So that's a lot of those things that are just purely commercial. It's like the point that you made with a Lady Alice that started as a clone, but if they've got a good picture, they don't even see a difference. All they see is that it's orange and white and reflects, and that's how they sell it. And it's this, I mean, I can tell you that if you're selling as Oregon Bulb Farms did to a lot of these large catalogs. If they can get, if you can, somebody can give them something similar to a picture and they can do it at half a penny less per bulb, that's what you'll get. And it'll say, you know, whatever, but, and that doesn't mean the other ones are any worse. It just means that explains what's going on. So.
Thank you, Judith.
You know, so that's my bit. If you
Okay.
know what's going on commercially, you know how those bulbs came to market. And like with Eastern Morn and those
Oh,
things. I
let me
mean,
tell you, Eastern Moon,
yeah,
when it first came out, which was what, 7, 8 years ago
Yeah.
now, maybe 10, it looked different than Easter Morn.
well, it's very different. See, and it's just because the Dutch company that got a bulb got the wrong bulb and they didn't know there was any difference.
Well, they're
And so
very
they
close.
just, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, they ripped off enough of my things that
Right. And
so that
Easter,
I know how it works. And so like Niels had bought a tray of what's supposed to be Easter morn, you know, to see what this looks like. And so he was going to put it in the catalog, and I was walking through the field. I don't go through there very often because it's not so close. And I said, that is not what that is, Niels. I don't care what the lily company in Holland told you. That's just a bunch of baloney. You can look at the bulbs and the color and pattern and the bud shape, and you know immediately it's a longiflorum hybrid. You know, it's got longiflorum in it, so that
right.
you wouldn't have, you can smell it and you can see it. If they never see them bloom because they disbud everything. So that anybody who saw those two plants together would know they were not even related, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
So
a commercial problem, and it makes a problem, but it's not intentional on their part. They just don't know any better.
and Easter Morn grows better than Eastern Moon. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And Yanis, you
Yeah.
had a question.
Yes, I just wanted to add some info because I was buying Lady Alice for 12 years ago, and I bought a couple of bulbs later. And what the Dutch sold was nothing like Lady
Yeah.
Alice.
They
They
just
had
use-
from yellow to something like somewhat orangish center and white and everything in between. And sometimes they don't even have papillae, or sometimes they had papillae with brown endings. So there was also a note in the latest supplement of the Lily Register that they said it's probably lost, that cultivar, because the original Lady Alice had pinkish orangish buds, and none of the plants show these orangish buds. They were all just white buds.
I mean,
No,
now we've
it's
got
really-
some more info. Thank you.
No.
Okay, Susan, you have a question. You have to unmute, Susan.
Okay. Can you hear me?
And Susan's will be the last one because we're starting
Okay,
to
this
go
business
over
of
time.
strains and clones, it's very simple. Strains basically come out of the same pod. And
That's
a
not true.
clone, and a clone is one that has been selected from that pod or from that group of seed that's been propagated. They all are like that one, but the strain itself comes out of that one pod. It's
Okay,
very
thank
simple.
you, Susan.
And
Okay.
I mean,
We're going to head on to the next one, which is Orientals. So, are you ready, Lynn? Lynn's not ready. What's happening, Lynn? You're not on mute, too. Okay. Okay, Orientals. And we'll go from there. By the way, that is an Oriental. It was called Bebop. It was huge blossoms, and it was at the Kugenhof in 2010, and I haven't seen it since. So that's the problem with Orientals. Let's go on to Orientals. Orientals. It will be hard to differentiate individual cultivars. The Oriental lily trade is mainly designed for cut flower trade, not for gardens. I would say at least 95% of all Orientals grown are for the cut flower trade. So the hybridizers that work with Orientals work in the parameters of a greenhouse grown, not field grown. They look for characteristics that will allow forcing, earlier bloom, less leaf scorching. Can they be forced in summer or winter? And the list goes on and on. They don't differentiate about color or the number of buds or the longevity of the flower. Next slide. Which one is Casablanca? They all have similar pollen color, similar stigma, but are they all Casablanca? No. Next slide. Flower form. Now, which is which? Number one, the one on the left is what supposedly is Casablanca. Number two on the right is Crystal Blanca. And the flower form basically is the exact same thing. The only difference is the plant structure and when they bloom. Next slide. White Orientals, we have, now we're going to go to the wholesaler catalogs, because this, if you want to try and find lilies, Oriental lilies, sometimes you have to refer back to these wholesale catalogs. The one on the top left side is what they call Casablanca. Now, the true Casablanca had a wimpy stem, and it was really out-facing, more out-facing than the newer variety cultivars. The next one is Crystal Blanca. The next one is Nova Zembla, and the other one is Siberia. And if you go into the wholesale catalogs, you'll see a half a dozen to a dozen more whites, all very similar. Next slide. As Johann Mach said, they are difficult to distinguish. Many look alike lilies. The difference is not that much in the nuances, but in their performance, especially with the varieties like Casablanca and Crystal Blanca. The difference for the eye is that the stem to the flowers of Crystal Blanca is a little bit shorter. It has flowers that can move more up, but that's about it. And the big difference is in blooming time, the sturdiness of the stem, and the bud count per size, which the Dutch want. For retail companies use the term Casablanca for flowers for like Crystal Blanca, anything that looks similar to Casablanca, and they have the bulbs, that's what they'll sell as Casablanca. Next slide. Stargazer, there's another one. Everybody knows about Stargazer. It was hybridized by Leslie Woodruff, and it and other cultivars revolutionized the cut flower trade for Orientals. And why? Because Stargazer was the first up-facing or almost up-facing flowering Oriental that could be put in plastic sleeves. Next slide. Remember those plastic sleeves? These pictures came from Peter Schenk. And Stargazer was hybridized in 1976, introduced in the Dutch market by the Dutch in the early 1980s. And by the year 2000, it was starting to decline in production. And now we have supposedly only one wholesaler left. So, next slide. So, at one time, Stargazer was the lily with the Oriental lily in the 80s that was in major wholesale production. Now, nowadays we have Starfighter versus Stargazer. If you see the flower of Stargazer and Starfighter, it is easier to tell the difference. Starfighter has a wider edge in the flower. Blooming time and bud count is also different. First is Stargazer for blooming time, then it's Starfighter. But these are the wholesale catalog pictures, which are not true to life. Next slide. And here we have different pictures of lilies that could be like Stargazer. The one on the upper right-hand side was Curry, and that was introduced around the year 2000. Now you see front page, and there's another other ones that are like Stargazer. Next slide. And here's Starfighter. This is a close-up, and you can see at the very tepals, the very wide white margin. Now that's the difference between that and stargazer. Next slide. Now I'm going to go through the most common Orientals that you may run into. And why I'm just going over a few, because Orientals are like trumpets. They're not long-lived. And in production, the Dutch will change the commercial production at a whim. So you will see Oriental maybe for 5 years in production, and then it disappears. So there's Acapulco, Bacardi, Big Smile, and versus Playtime, Bombastic. These are all ones that are relatively common nowadays. Next slide. Acapulco. Acapulco, way back around the turn of the century, 2000, this was the this was the most popular Oriental in production that was pink. I don't know if any of you have it anymore, but I doubt it. But it lasted for about 15 years in production. Now it's disappeared. Next slide. Now we have Bacardi versus Bombastic. Bacardi is on the picture of the Bacardi is on the left, and the wholesale catalog Bacardi is on the right, and up above is Bombastic. That's probably going to replace Bacardi, but you can still get Bacardi. Next slide. Then we have Big Smile and Playtime, and you can see they're very similar looking lilies. Playtime is a shorter lily. Again, the growth habits different than Big Smile, and of course, now the color can vary on all these lilies. So sometimes you can't just go by the red in the center of the petals. You have to go by the plant structure. Next slide. Firebolt versus Powerglass. And Firebolt is the picture of the one is in the bottom, and the top one is Powerglass. They're very similar looking, but you won't see them too often. Okay, next slide. Next one is Commitment versus Sixth Sense. Sixth Sense was quite common at one time, and the bottom one is Commitment. And they look very similar, except that Commitment had the white line. Next slide. Next slide is Captain Tricolor, and I present you with 3 different pictures of Captain Tricolor, and you can see there's a big variation. The color on the bottom is what you see in pictures on Google, and the top one is what you would probably see in the garden with really good coloration. And the one on the right-hand side is what you'll normally see in the sunshine or warm weather, where the pink almost fades out. So remember, you've got to be careful about looking at Orientals and their color, because the color can vary tremendously with the temperature and when it opens. If it's a cool weather in the morning when it opens, then you'll have lovely color. And most of the commercial pictures you see are sort of staged, and they're probably greenhouse grown, which makes it a big difference. Next slide. We have Curly Sue at the top. We have Josephine on the right-hand side, and we have Portland at the bottom. They're all very similar. Curly Sue you still see around. Portland is a Johann Mock introduction that you won't see too much anymore. And Josephine is coming back in again. That's that pink one on the right-hand side. Next slide. Okay, here we go. Interesting comment here. Dizzy is the one you most often see, and that's the top one at the top. Tiger Woods is at the right-hand side. And Hot Lips, which was introduced at the same time as Tiger Woods, which was interesting, is the one on the bottom. Now I have a feeling Hot Lips and Dizzy are basically the same lily, except they've renamed Hot Lips maybe to Dizzy because Hot Lips maybe didn't sell or something. But the difference now, oftentimes Tiger Woods had bigger, broader petals, and Dizzy has more narrower petals and tepals. Same coloration though. Next slide. Extravaganza, solution of muscadet or muscadet. Extravaganza you won't see too often. That's the top left-hand one. I'm sorry, top left-hand one. The bottom left-hand one is muscadet. Now, solution is on the right-hand side. Again, you will see that variation in color. Normal weather, out in a garden, you will see the top right-hand picture will be solution. And if it's ideal conditions and maybe partially grown in shade, you will see solution with that red band. So remember, color is hard to tell when it comes to Orientals. Next slide. Then we have the edge and hot line, and I think they are both the same lily, or very close to being the same lily. Again, the color, one was the top one was hotline that was in the Kugenhof. The bottom is the edge that was grown in the garden, and it was a cool day and it was in shade, so you got that dark outer line showing up. Next slide. Chill Out and Tiger Moon. The top picture on the right-hand side is Tiger Moon. The left-hand picture is Tiger Moon, or Yellow Tiger is another name for it. And the bottom picture is Chill Out. Chill Out it has the same coloration and the same shape of flower and everything as Tiger Moon, except it doesn't have the papillae. And you'll see Chill Out once in a while in commercial production. And Tiger Moon, the yellow band can fade almost to nothing again if it's really hot and sunny. Next slide. Sorbonne and Marlin. The top are the commercial wholesaler catalog pictures, the stage pictures, and the bottom is in garden pictures. The coloration between Sorbonne and Marlin is basically the same. Marlin has a few little more papillae, and it is a larger flower and more out-facing than Sorbonne. Next slide. At one time, Sorbonne was one of the most popular Orientals in production, but not anymore. Okay, next slide. I'm sorry. Jaybird and Tiger Edition. Okay. Here are two pictures of Jaybird on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is Tiger Edition. It's hard to distinguish sometimes if you had a picture of Tiger Edition or the Tiger Edition on the upper right-hand side and the Jaybird on the lower left-hand side look very similar. And the one at the bottom right-hand side is the officially grown, shall we say, commercial example of Tiger Edition, and that was at the Kugenhof. They presented that. So you might have problems distinguishing these. They're very close. Next slide. And Jasmine and Jupe, again, we have very similar looking. The one on the right-hand side is Jupe. The one on the right-hand side is Jasmine. I'm getting my dyslexic today. And the one on the left-hand side is Jupe. Next slide. Classic that's been around for ages, that still looks like the same lily as it was 15 years ago, is Salmon Star. And it is a longer lasting Orientals and an excellent varietal or cultivar And if you can get it, I would get it. For one of the Orientals that's going to stand up, this is one of the better growers. Next slide. And then I just put Lilium auratum in here. You'll see that in production, whether it's really a species that you get or just a seed-grown variety, cultivar, it's hard to say. Next slide. And the species of Orientals that be good, make good garden lilies. Good garden lilies are Lilium speciosum album, which is one on the left. I mean, I'm doing that all the time today. And the speciosum on the left, on the right. Glorosides, that's a beautiful picture of it, is not an excellent garden lily, as we know from Rick's comments, but I just had to put it in because it is beautiful. Next. Now, Journey's End, and then there's Summer's End. Journey's End was a classic speciosum type lily that was a cultivar that was used a lot in hybridizing because it had tremendous disease resistance and it was long lasting. The picture on the right-hand side is Summer's End, and that's a seed from Journey's End. And this was grown in New Zealand. As you can see, they have garden lilies, Oriental garden lilies in New Zealand, where most of us don't. Next slide. And now we talk about the latest craze, which is the introduction of the double Orientals. There are somewhere between 50 plus of these types, and they keep coming out yearly. Flamingo has, the wholesaler Flamingo has rose lilies, and De Jong has lotus lilies. They're all doubles. They've created lines, and they call them rose lilies, or they call lotus lilies. Next slide. And here we have all your introductions. It's hard to distinguish. It will be very hard. As you can see, the two on the left side are white lilies, and to distinguish the two of them, the only way you could is when you grew them side by side. Then we're getting different colors that are coming out, and also the doubleness is changing too. They're getting more and more complex on the doubleness. Next slide. Here's a couple that are named that I had pictures of, Accolade. And again, you got to be careful with the color. You see the difference in the three pictures, and the color can vary. So you have to really go by what you bought as the cultivar's name. Next slide. And distant drums. One on the left-hand side is, I grew it in a pot. They're very good for growing in pots, these Orientals, by the way. And the next one is what it looked like close up. And the one on the right-hand side is the commercial wholesaler's picture. So this one is close, but not all this are as close as this one for accuracy. Next slide. And Diantha, again, we have one commercial picture is the left, another commercial picture is the top right, and what was at a show is the bottom right. So there you can see again color, and there is variation. So you have to go by the cultivar's name when you buy it and hope for the best. Next slide. And here are a couple of the white ones coming out. Gopa or Gupa is the top, and you can see it's got a few filaments with some anthers. The next one is Snowboard, and I grew that last year, and it did have a couple of anthers, but the newer ones coming out are Chardonnay and Lotus Beauty, and they look pretty close to being the same. Next slide. And then we have Wave Rider at the top. Oops. Anyways, the names of these didn't get put in. Then, so there's a bigger variation that's coming out. These are the bottom ones are the lotus lilies. And you can see the doubling is increasing, and there's getting greater variation in the coloration and the very bigger variation in color. Next slide. And that's the end. Questions. And we have the chat. Let's see. Okay. Any questions? Okay, good. The one thing that and you'll see more and more of the double Orientals. The Orientals, you can grow them in the garden if you have acid soil, filtered shade, and the bulbs are cut. The bulbs have some type of protection to cover them from the sun and heat. Then they will last for a couple years. They are more of a biannual, perennial than anything else.
Yanis did have his hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I recently got into Orientals, just a few because I don't have acidic soils. But for example, Bacardi looks very nice as a cut flower if you cut them at color bud, but on the stem the flowers are so close together that they couldn't open nicely. So these cultivars are mainly designed now for just, as you said, for cut flower and shipping them in nice plastic wraps. So
Okay, I should
that's really
mention
good
that.
Yeah.
I'll mention one thing about the Orientals and all the cut flowers and the OTs. The new hybrids are all designed for darker, larger buds. That's one of the priorities of a new cultivar that is commercially viable. The darker the bud, the larger the bud, the premium the price it will go at the clock in Holland. So that's what they're hybridizing for, and that's what you'll see. Also, somebody asked about Orientals in growing them in pots. I grow them in Pro Mix, and clay pots is best for Orientals because the clay breathes and it keeps the soil cooler. So you'll have them growing very well that year. They are excellent for growing in pots, Orientals. That's about it. Rick, you had your question up first, and then it's Judith.
Yeah, I want to say that the acid soils for Orientals is especially important for me up north for the cold hardiness. And the other thing was when you were showing the Lilium speciosums, that middle picture, that was the Taiwan form of
the other form.
smoothies.
Yeah, yeah, that was gorgeous. I couldn't resist
Yeah.
showing that picture. Judith, yes, unmute yourself. Very good, Judith. Congratulations.
Okay, I've kind of finally learned. Anyway, what the point I wanted to make is what you just were saying about what they're breeding for in a cut flower Oriental is exactly the opposite of what you want if you're breeding it for the garden. You do not want something that makes one gigantic flower that always traces back to Auratum. You want something with smaller flowers that traces back to speciosum. Because the only source in the whole gene pool of all the Orientals to tolerate any amount of heat and to tolerate virus is speciosum. So and it's not, I mean, many years ago, there was an erect form of it, but it's not made for that. So that when you look at all those doubles, look at how there's zero variation in the flower and stem form. That's what makes it so boring. I mean, no wonder you can't tell the things apart, because they were all bred to fit into, to fit machinery. So that
they are bred to fit in machinery and to
what it's
production.
For, only for
yes.
that. Yeah.
And Lauren.
Okay, I'm through.
No, we'll get back to you in just a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just have a question. So around, obviously when you're judging a show, you highlighted the variability and the duplicity of naming of some of these varieties. How do you manage that dynamic?
That's where the classification person comes in. And the more knowledgeable they are, the easier it is to classify all these things. But we'll have to start putting the trumpets, most of the trumpets, like Pink Perfection, African Queen, Golden Splendor, in the section E, in that group section, and not in section D in the cultivar section. And that's basically, there's only going to be very few in the cultivar, and that would be, let's say, Madam Butterfly and Rising Moon and a couple of others, and probably the Planet series. The Planet series looks like they're cultivars because they're very consistent. Now, Judith, go ahead. Oh, I was going to mention Johann Mock, and he's introducing speciosum in some of his newer Orientals.
Oh yeah, I kept razzing him about that, and he really took the bait, and he spread all these. He has a lot of beautiful things that have speciosum in them.
So
So
Johann
then you
Mock,
get a long inflorescence, and it blooms for a long time. So
we may have an opportunity to have real garden lilies with Johann Mock.
yeah, I
So
think that
if
would
you're
be
going to grow,
wonderful. Yeah.
and cold hardiness is not a major issue with Orientals, because Tom Greatrix, who was up in, I think, zone 3 or 4, up it was called Coldwater, up in cottage country, he could grow them and they'd be huge. He'd had huge bulbs and he could grow them for a number of years, but he had an acid soil. He had heavily mulched them, probably with white pine needles, and they were growing in very close to a stand of white pine. So that was the pH is an important thing. Also, shading the bulbs until the flowers come out is another thing, and probably having them on the east side where it's the cooler sun would be ideal. So some of you can grow them in zone 4, but you need those conditions.
Yeah, and the hard part about them is where they come from in Japan. It's the rainy season when they're in full leaf. And you think about what the leaves look like on an auratum. They're those big wide leaves that are just transpiring tons of, transpiring all this water. So that's not the same as for a trumpet or the things that are bred that need, they need some water earlier, but later on they don't need it. They can tolerate the heat. And Oriental has leaves that are still soft and watery all the time, so you have to watch for that. And I've wondered sometimes if you could use some of those chemical things or that coat the leaves and can hold back on that. But I think putting them in clay pots, as you said, Brian, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and that's clay pots is the ideal thing for if you want to grow Orientals in the garden. And then what I have done in the past is I grow them in clay pots and put them in and let them grow in the shade, and then bring them out when they're blooming out into the sun. And then you'll have beautiful big pots of gorgeous flowers.
And I've got tons of seed from these old Oriental strains. Like I have pounds of Auratum platyphyllum and those kinds of things. But of course, they don't want that for the cut flower market. If you order Auratum from most places that sell supposedly for the garden trade, you're just going to get whatever yellow banded, whatever the gold band upright was that year that was the most popular. But if you want to get something for your garden and your climate, grow some of these, just grow a ton of seed and throw out all the ones that do badly. And in a couple of generations, you'll have the ones that they may not be perfect for your climate, but they'll be better than the Dutch cut flowers. So,
okay.
I'm through.
Okay. Thank you, Judith. No, that information is very important. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you for your patience. Lynn, are you still there to give us the plug for next time? And next time we'll be talking about interdivisionals. This is division 8, and this is going to be a heavy duty one because this is where all the action is now in lilies. As Forrest said, trumpets are short-lived, and the new interdivisional lilies, some of them that we are hybridizing, they're interdivisional, but they have a lot of trumpet blood in them, so they will last for a number of years and keep lasting. So I've had a number of my hybrids last for 10, 15 years. But the whole thing, remember about trumpets though, remember about those seed pods, cut them off. And some of your, if you have a hybrid that you've bought from someone that has a trumpet-like characteristics, cut those seed pods off too. That is one thing you have to do. Unless you're trying to hybridize, cut those seed pods off, because then you'll get an extended garden lily, not a short time garden lily. Okay, thank you very much. And I guess we'll say goodbye and good night and have a wonderful evening. And we'll see you again. Thank you.